Okay. Well, for people joining the live stream, this is one of our series of meetings on language completeness and consistency for Wolfram Language. Okay, so this is about the function information, which is a general function for giving information about objects. And for some strange reason, okay. So, do we have people from design here?
We should. I believe Heidi is here. Yep, Heidi's here. Right, and there are two sets of issues. I think what we see here is only going to sort of deal with one of them. But I guess we can. Oh, this isn't the most up-to-date version.
Yeah, let me send that to you on. Yeah, I think I put a wrong link. Let me send it to you really quick, Steve.
Okay.
So let's put the visual away for a second and go to the second bullet point, which is about. So right there's been work on this undocumented function file information, and that's been progressing recently. And
what does it do, and how does it? So it's a thing where you can give it a string, and it will give you a similar information box about the file. Is that right?
Right. And I was thinking we didn't. My recollection of our decision was that we're not going to have any new full information things, and that we probably don't want to document file information.
I wouldn't have thought so. I mean, I think it would just be information of file of the string.
Right. Yeah, so if anybody, that was my feeling as well. If anybody wants to disagree, they can. All the relevant people are here.
Yeah, and I did send the right link, but it looks like Heidi has updated the mockup with more examples in it. So It was the right link.
Okay, so what's the below the fold, above the fold type thing?
Right. So if you have a prototype build, you can see what it looks like now. And we certainly have, we do have openers. I'm not sure, do we have a below the fold, above the fold, Nick? I don't remember off the top of my head.
There was sort of a question of if we want to have an above and below the fold system, do we want there to be some priority in determining what properties are there? Do we just show the first few of them because normally they're going to be sorted roughly by relevance or at least by what the...
Well, your point is you're asking for information. You should get it. Why are you below the fold, above the folding? I agree with that. You didn't say that, but I'm agreeing with that.
Okay, yeah. And then for the visuals here, the fourth mock-up or the final column is the closest to what we currently have, but adds a little bit of extra detail. And Heidi had also looked at some other options to try and bold some of the particular information we have. If there's basically a primary.
That's really ugly. I mean, that having no structure there just doesn't cut it for me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, my concern about using colors like this is that, right, I don't think we have, unique colors per each, nor would we necessarily want unique color per each type of object that might be eaten.
I wouldn't be recommending that either. I would be recommending a default generic gray for anything less important.
Okay, so that third, the cloud one, is that your default generic gray?
Yeah, third and fifth both had no color.
Third, I see Design Mock 3 here. Looks like it has...
If you scroll down to the bottom of the column. Yeah.
Wait a minute. I'm quite liking 3 here.
Yeah,
these are different instances of the same mock-up. Right? So each column is different instances of the same design proposal.
And the variation here being that some types like functions or data bins or entity types may have the first field with a different color that's associated with those particular things. So the yellowish.
But this heading here says usage, and it shouldn't. It should say function if it's going to say anything.
Or symbol.
Yeah, and this isn't right. This isn't the correct thing, because that's the UUID, which is specific. This is confused. I'm sorry.
Right.
This is because this thing needs to be labeled, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean,
and I think this is really ugly, having this double guttery thing here.
Yeah, I didn't like that one at all.
Right, but that's not. But the problem is, you've got to label this, because we could put a heading at the top of the whole thing that says what it is, namely, built-in symbol. I don't think that would be a bad thing to do. Am I making sense? Or symbol or something?
yeah, I think I would recommend symbol, data bin, entity, or
Object, etc. So do you think in terms of the primary banner, the design mock 1B, there's the little extra bit of header there that we'd probably get rid of in place of.
right. Now the thing about the the blue color and being there below below usage, right, is that another one of our design goals is to sort of merge for symbols for which there already is an information, merge the appearance of the usage you get from information with this new information. So right. So if we're going to use the blue only only at the very top where it says symbol, then I suppose we could have question mark and double question mark use some special mode where it displays differently, right? But it's right.
Okay. Look. The point is, we need a header bar that says what kind of a thing it is. Okay, that header bar shouldn't be terribly emphasized. I think the level of emphasis that we're seeing in Design Mark 3 is good for that. Okay, I think the thing where we have a color block there that is nice for this, although I don't know if we're always going to end up with a big, gosh. I think there's an argument that the identifying element, whether it's the bin ID, no, not a good idea. Okay, look, the top bar should be the category of thing it is. There can be color for the first entry, if that makes any sense. Am I making sense?
Okay.
And then, but every entry has to be labeled, and I don't see how to do the labeling of that color first entry without, and this is not right, to put the usage thing, I think that's ugly there. Get what I'm saying?
Yeah,
this isn't going to work here.
Key aligned with the rest of the column makes it a little awkward.
Right. I mean, we could.
Jeremy's going to join us in a minute here. Go ahead. Yeah.
I mean, depending on what we could make some number of these guys magic, right? So that, for example, symbols and entities, you get the color thing with no label, and then for generic things, we have a label and maybe some default color, or maybe it's all mono.
Oh, yeah. Look, the things we need, every line needs to be labeled, like the UUID needs to be labeled and so on. So could we please see a mock-up where it has a heavier gray bar at the top here, followed by, I wish we didn't have so much background noise. I don't know who's generating that. It's very distracting.
I think that's the wind blowing against my not perfectly sealed office window. So not much I can do about that.
I'm skeptical, but anyway, never mind. Not that you can't do anything, but that's the cause of that particular noise.
You have never been in his office when it's windy.
Oh, okay. It's okay. In any case, so I think it's got to be that slightly heavier gray, a title at the top. Every line is identified, and then the only question is, for the case of a symbol like this, I think we cheat. And for that case, which we know to be a special case, we do not label the usage, but we simply do this for that. Do you get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
For other cases, they're pretty boring anyway, and we just have the header bar because we don't have narrative text for in most of these others, right?
Right. I mean, it may be that some of the machine learning things.
Well, I don't know. We can look at that, but they may have pictures and things. But I think we have the possibility of a distinguished thing that might have even a color background. So in this case here, where we say file and then file type, that's a bit goofy because it's going to say file at the top.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, it would be name or path.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. Okay, I think this is reasonable. I don't know what we do for the entities and whether we do anything particularly interesting for them. I mean, we could make the header bar yellow in that case. But we're not going to say entity type. We're going to say, well, okay, unless in some of these cases we move we could say country entity and have that be yellow. Right? In other words, the header bar in that case could be non-generic in the sense that it's using information about what type of entity it is. It could also be colored.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think my expectation for entity would be that, the type and the name would be sort of flipped in that representation. And you'd have sort of the Spain in the yellow block and type country underneath. But
let's see what it looks like in that way. I don't think these icons are adding anything. I think we should not do them. Okay. I think Jeremy Davis joined. Does he have any comments?
Yeah, I am here. Yeah, as treated, I don't think the icons are doing much. So is the plan to still have the title in the dark gray? That's generic. It's the type, basically?
Yeah, it's the type, except in this case here where I think we should say country entity.
Yeah, okay.
Or just country. Why not just country? And this would say here cloud object, right?
Yeah.
And this here would say data bin.
Right. Well, then I'm not sure why you say country instead of entity.
It could get us into trouble in some domains, like for Mathematica functions, where if the title just says Mathematica function, you may think it's referring to a symbol when it's actually referring to a mathematical function or Mathematica.
I understand, but that's why it's a yellow.
Mm. Okay.
He says slightly unconvincingly.
Yes, I'm not convinced.
Well, so are you proposing then? All right, so you're proposing that we say entity at the top in the gray bar, and then in the yellow we say Spain.
I would be okay with that. Right? We say country.
Actually, what we could do is we could show whatever we normally do, Spain paren country. Whatever we normally do in the entity specifier.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
That would also work.
I think that's a solution for this. Oops, what on earth happened here? Okay, that was an interesting bug. That was an interesting bug, by the way, that's worth reporting. Dynamic updating was not on, and when I kept typing, it went outside of the whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so I think it could look like the disembodied version of this without all of its orange bordering.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. We have a solution then. There may be some other cases to worry about, but I think this is basically going to work.
Right. I mean, there's a second question that we need to think about and so in the notebook, evaluate question mark plot star. right? So there's also this case.
Okay.
And so...
I think this is rather magnificent, except that it needs a little bit of design tweaking.
And so, right, and there's a second... So are you saying that in this case we should basically reproduce this current appearance?
So is that supposed to be equivalent to information of plot star?
Yes. Which I'm not sure what, if anything, it currently does at the moment.
The same thing.
Yeah, within the normal release kernel, that's what it does.
Oh, yeah, you're not in the prototype, though.
If you're in the prototype version, because we don't want information to be side effect heavy, it is a very rough approximation of this, where it basically goes through and creates an actual output that has the same info. So there's a wrapper around it right now, but it still produces the side effects when you click on them. And what we were thinking is that probably when you click on those, you should get the information pod that you would get if you look up that symbol. And what we want the interaction
thing here.
You would get that thing there.
Yeah. Okay.
And then there's just sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So, right. So, I mean, so there's a little bit about the visuals, right? We could like make that gray background transparent. And so then it would look like the current information, or if we want to tweak that some other way. And then the question is, should clicking on this, spawn off a new cell? Back when information was printing a side effect, a side effect printing, it made sense for this to be a separate cell. The question is, does this want to spawn off, or should this provide some interface that switches the look, or... I'm not sure what the answer to that question is.
I'm thinking. I think it should make a... I think probably that link should cell print a new cell that is one of these boxes.
Okay.
Now, whether it overwrites, I'm not sure. Right now, it's overwriting, right? As opposed to generating the whole sequence of this thing, then this thing, then this thing. I have to say, I think it might be more useful to generate the sequence rather than do the overwrite.
I mean, there are cases when that's true. In my personal use, I generally like the overwrite.
Anybody else have an opinion?
Perhaps if there is a way to go back to the original cell so that you can click somewhere else.
Well, no. Overwrite in the following sense. Look, if I press plot region, it's going to overwrite what was here. You see?
So then you can just click on the first thing again, and it will overwrite again and restore the previous.
Right. All right, let's leave it as overwrite.
Yeah, if it were to keep adding cells, that would be great until you clicked 15, and then you keep having to scroll back up.
Extrusion is bad. Okay, fine. Let's overwrite. Okay, I'm not too bothered about the cell print thing. Now, in terms of the look of this creature, this is a fairly special case. I think the way that the contexts are handled could be a little better. Okay? I mean, it's not terrible, but I think it could be a little better. Now, is it... I mean, if I do this, we'll probably get a much bigger output. I see.
Right, and if you create a symbol called P in global, then I guess J-Link has some P's there. There we go. So.
Well, this is basically quite nice. I mean, I don't really have a problem with this. The only question is whether the design sort of style is appropriate for what we have for the rest of it. Heidi and Jeremy, comments on that?
That blue's a little much. I mean, tone it back a little bit. It just seems a little overwhelming, but I mean, it's not horrible.
Okay. What about the way these arrows work and things? And what about? I think those would be more naturally in a bar at the top of some kind.
Like documentation, that makes sense. So the whole kind of bar would be clickable.
Yeah. Well, more like this, I suppose. More like those bars, perhaps.
Yeah. Okay.
From our live stream, the suggestion it would look nice to nest panels for sub-package contexts. Interesting idea. I mean, remember, these have to be publicly visible contexts on the context.
Right. Although if you include a context pattern, it will also find sub-contexts.
So if I say
star
private backtick P star, it's going to get all kinds of random junk. What would this look like if it was nested in some way?
Right, then I guess you would have a calculate utilities bar, or
I see, and then that's cute. That would be nice, actually. That would be nice. I think that's a luxury item, but I think it would be nice. And maybe in the terms of the design, you could try and work something up that would deal with that in a sensible way. Heidi, use this as your example. Heidi, are you still with us?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, I think that would help. Now, yeah, and I like the way these openness closers work as a way to sort of navigate this pile of information. So minor tweaks to this, but otherwise I think we're good here. And I don't really think the line printer, alternating colors of line printer paper necessarily does anything for me.
Well, I mean, it helps. I think it does help readability.
Okay, well, maybe it's a good idea. Jeremy, Heidi, comment?
The whole thing's a little much for me. I'd like to tone it back. Maybe the lines toning back or going away, but I think it needs to be toned back a little bit.
Okay.
Right now, it seems kind of noisy.
Fine. Okay. I think that's it for this item. Unless anybody has anything else. Itai, anything else on this?
I don't think so, Nick.
No, that pretty much answers all the remaining questions I had. So we'll work on.
Great. Okay. Information, here we come. All right. So people who are involved just in that part of this discussion can drop off.
Thank
See
you.
you all soon. Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Okay. Next up, sorting function.
Right. So there was this idea from Danny, which you said it seemed interesting that instead of sorting function, we have sorted by, which I actually liked too. So
yeah, sorted by. It's a little weird. What's an example where we'd be using this, like eigenvalues or something, sorted by whatever? It's a little cutesy.
Well, Fine Faces is the current consumer of it.
Right. Okay. So the question is whether we sort youth before beauty or something. Well, we don't really have beauty, but we can have youth before. We can sort by increasing youth or decreasing youth. Can we please cut out the background noise? Okay.
Benny, were you trying to say something there?
No, there's noise coming from outside my office.
Okay. I'm sorry. I still think sorting function sounds more appropriate. And I feel like there are going to be some special cases of sorting function that are going to be named sorting functions, which is why I'm not so keen on having an explicit sorted by and then giving a function name. So my tendency is to say we should continue with sorting function.
The point of sorted by was to remove that ambiguity between the by and the not by sorting stuff.
Yeah, I know. I don't know. Any comments from other people?
I do like sorted by.
I like sorted by.
All right, let's try doing sorted by.
Okay.
All right, let's go on. Two-way rule.
Right. So this was a thread about whether
two-way rule should be supported and replace.
Yes. String replace and replace. The replace family of functions.
Right. Now, clearly, when there are patterns, it's kind of a complicated situation. I mean, if we're saying replace, if we say, ABC /dot, exchange A with C. That's kind of cute. Right? That seems very nice to be able to do that.
Right.
But now, less obvious is what to do. And I'd say we should support, I think that's a nice piece of syntactic, it's going to make some nice looking code. Now, the question is, if this is instead, f of A, f of B, g of C, /dot, f blank, exchange with g blank. Can that mean something?
Well, I have an even simpler example for you. I mean, what if you did
by the way, this is hopeless because we don't know what to bind the blanks to, do we? Yeah. I mean, this is exactly what happens in the when we're doing the theorem proving stuff, when we have these two-way transformations. And how have we done that in the theorem proving case? Jose, can you comment on that?
I don't remember what you mean.
Okay, so here's what I mean. Yeah, see, here we've got, I see, so everything's been one-wayified. By the way, this function should have the big examples rather than having to go to proof object for all the examples. But that's a different story. If you could make that comment to Jonathan, that would be helpful. I don't know whether we want to copy over all the examples, but we need more examples in this function itself. Jose, did that make sense?
I'm a bit confused. So you want more properties of the results of?
Yeah, I want to be able to show how you get. Yes, I want to be able to show with a sub-value immediately find equational proof of blah, sub-value, proof graph and so on. I mean, we can show more actual results here, right? Because this is the main workhorse function that's doing things, not proof object, which is really just having things accessed. I mean, I think we should move the bulk of the examples into find equational proof and out of proof object. See what I'm saying?
Yes. Okay, I see what you mean. Yes.
Okay, but the point that I'm making here is I don't even know how any of this stuff works. I mean, this is f of g of x blank goes to f of x, but isn't that also one that goes the other way around, or has it been resolved into being one direction or the other by now?
At the moment, it has been already resolved. So Wellmeister provides the direction in which it should go.
Okay. Okay, so that's been resolved. But at the beginning, I see here what we're doing is we're purely we're not using patterns to represent the two-way equivalences.
No.
Okay, anyway, Itai, you were going to give me another horror case.
Yeah, sorry. So I think Danny has it there with in the thread there where AB exchange, basically where your cursor is, AB goes to A, right? So if, let's see if I can generate an example in real time. Right, but basically, what if you have, a case where something gets turned in, right, where it matters of whether you do the left to right exchange first or the right to left.
Yes, I understand. Well, we can define that. I mean, and also it's a question of how /dot recursively descends through the expression, because this, if the expression is A, AB, A, B, or something like this. Well, that's a bad example. Let's put another brace in there. Right, which one, should it see the whole AB first, or should it see the A first, and turn that into an AB, in which case, what does it do then? Well, it's now touched it. So for that pass of the slash dot, by the usual rules of slash dot, it should do nothing. Make sense?
I think this should be always equivalent to the left goes to the right, and then comma, the right goes to the left.
Okay, that's a very reasonable point of view. So in that case, what we would be saying is this thing, slash dot, left goes to right, right goes to left. Okay, so what does that do? Okay. Dandy, that's fine. I mean, that's a perfectly sensible result. Okay, so the issue is only with pattern variables then.
Right.
Well, what are the choices? We could give an error. I don't think there's anything useful to do.
Right, and I don't think we have any patterns that take other patterns that only take literals. Maybe I'm just not thinking of one, but it's a little weird to introduce something that only works with literals.
It is a little weird, but I mean, the fact is, if anybody thinks about it, they'll realize why it can't work with patterns. And most of the time, people will try this for literals because that's the case where it works.
But it could have worked with named patterns, right? Right. The F of A underscore left right arrow G of A underscore.
How could that work?
Because that just expands out into, right? That would be the same basically as F goes to G, except except only when F and G are heads.
We don't generally have patterns on right sides of rules.
Sorry, you're right. I'm being silly. Yep.
Right. It's only it binds the name and then the name.
Yeah. I'm being.
All right. Listen, I think we should do this and just generate a message if the thing has patterns in it. Say only possible with literals. Anybody object? I think that's what we should do.
I don't like it. But
I think it's a nice and useful thing. And I think it's a convenient shorthand for, as Jose says, it's equivalent to one rule than the other.
So
we can look, I'll tell you what, let's look at what actually happens. Okay, so what's going to happen is if we do this, let's see what it actually does. Okay.
You're going to get literal patterns.
Yeah.
You'll get G of
the right thing.
Or G of A underscore F of A underscore.
And you already got a message.
Yeah, so maybe this is fine. This is just fine. You can expand it the exact same way. Yeah, I mean, use Jose's rule, and then the messages fall where the chips fall, so to speak. All right, let's go on.
So quick question, at the risk of irritating Itai. Do we also want to extend this to replace part, where you say replace part something and then position to a rule position, and have it just sort of
really weird. It's cute, but really weird. So you're saying that's just weird, if I might say so.
That's fundamentally changing what the rule means.
Yeah, I think it's a little crazy, but it's an interesting operation. It's a swapping operation. We've never needed that operation in all these years.
Well, this is a permute operation.
Yeah, I suppose.
Well, and so, in fact, we do have permute, which, having said that we've never needed this operation in all these years, we actually have it.
So this would be cycles to three.
Well, that's a question. Whether permute...
Shouldn't two-way rule work here?
Yeah, that's what I would think.
I mean, did we not actually add it? I mean,
it's probably not supported, but
right, because it's certainly supported in tensor transpose, so there's no reason why it shouldn't work in permute.
This seems sensible to me.
Right. Yeah.
Where else do we have reversible operations like this?
Well, anything that takes cycles. So that's flatten, or does flatten actually take cycles, or flatten only takes flatten notation?
No, flatten doesn't take permutations.
Okay.
Flatten is something irreversible.
But what about some of the array flatten type things where they go for particular levels and so on? Not clear. Okay, let's move on if we can. That's a good point about permute.
Mm-hmm.
All right, caching as opposed to suppressing repeated error messages.
So this is something that I think is pretty crazy. I guess the one thing that's perhaps not completely crazy is, I mean, we do have ways to sort of internal ways of dealing with messages as they arise that are not really documented, and maybe there's something there.
Let's remind ourselves what the issue is. The issue is that there might be 1,000 error messages. We are displaying only the first 3, and somebody wants to see the whole, collection of all the error messages. Is that right? One could call it messageology. Somebody wants to do some kind of message analytics on this whole collection of messages rather than just seeing the first 3.
Right. Although he doesn't want them to all appear at once, because for one thing that would, or I guess would appear continuously, because that would hang his front end.
Oh wow! Didn't know he did it once. Well, whatever. I can generate. Let's say.
I was going to say change the C to I and iterate over.
All right. So the famous general stop from 30 years ago is still with us. And now what we can do here, so the issue is with this, we can do show a stack trace, and it's all very jolly. How often are you guys using that? I mean, I find myself using it occasionally. The stack trace.
Using what?
The stack trace.
I use it regularly.
Good.
I use it somewhat, but only after turning off the internal filter, because otherwise
Ditto.
That's what I was about to say. Is I've never.
You guys are special cases,
and I find that the stack trace always contains exactly 2 things: the outermost expression and the thing, and the bad thing, and no stack in between. And so I don't find it useful.
Right. Okay. But so the main question here is, if we generated all, would it be useful to see kind of the analytics of all 10 of these things? And the answer is probably yes. And so the issue is, what you definitely don't want is all these things spewing into the front end, right? So what would be nice in modern times, and certainly was not conceivable back in 1987 when this was designed, is if down here you could see something that went, log 10 times or something. If this could aggregate itself and say, and 10 more of the same, which is what this is almost saying, but not quite. Now, in principle, it could be dynamic in the sense that as, what you could be seeing in a perfect world, what you could be seeing is a thing that says 10 more of the same, 11, 12, 13, 14, etc., with that number dynamically changing. Is there a way of generating, how do I get that list of messages? Can I just say messages of, I have not...
So not the quieted ones. I mean, there isn't a documented way to get the quieted messages. There are internal ways of...
what is that? Wait a minute. What am I doing here?
I think messages is giving you a list of messages associated
with the do thing. So what is the...
I think you want $message list.
Yeah.
Right. So
I haven't used this.
But it needs to be part of the evaluation. So if you have it as part of a compound,
so it's not even a wrapper
with the do, right?
Right. Okay. So you can tell I haven't used this very much. So, to my mind, having better message analytics, for example, being able to see that a particular message is like counting up the number of times it's being issued and things will be nice. And being able to get sort of the summary, the data structure that represents the names of the messages like this will be nice.
Right. I don't disagree that it would be nice, but there are a lot of quieted messages, right? I mean, there are quieted. If as somebody who runs the debugger and sometimes puts the breakpoints in O message, I can tell you that there are a heck of a lot of quieted messages in like basically every evaluation.
Second, third, and fourth that.
So
okay, but wait a second. So
no, Dan, you can't fourth it because general stop kicked in.
Right. How soon I forget.
In any case, but explicitly quieted messages are different from stopped messages. And we're not talking about quieted messages here. We're talking about stopped messages. Now, I don't know whether the internal mechanism happens to be the same for those two cases.
I don't think it is.
Right. So we're only talking about displaying stopped messages. I agree. It's a complete ridiculous, you're going way too deep in the can of worms if you're going to look at all quieted messages.
Right. So Jeremy, when you set up a message handler, can you tell the difference between quieted messages and stopped messages? Because I mean, it may be internal. That's you can only do that in C. But
I don't know. I don't think so, but I'm not sure that I've actually tried it.
Okay, wait a minute. Let's assume that there is a way. Maybe the hook doesn't exist right now to get the stopped messages.
Mm-hmm.
So then what would we do with the stopped messages? The idea would be to have a richer, version of this output, including, for example, a count for the number of each message. I don't know what else would be useful. I mean, would it be useful to have a word cloud of what messages occurred? I don't know.
Please no.
What?
Yeah.
You just don't want a word cloud inside the message generator.
What happens when that generates messages?
Yeah. I was just wondering that too.
And to answer Itai's question, the handler actually doesn't realize that the message is being suppressed.
Okay. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean? The handler, which handler? So can I get the stopped messages out somehow or not?
There is an internal way of doing that, yes.
Okay, fine.
Does it then not get the general stop message, or does it see it also?
It also sees the general stop message.
Okay.
So I guess your point is that you can capture the general stop message, and that way you can figure out that it's being issued and is not quieted but won't appear.
Right. Okay, fine. Okay, so then the question is, what would we like to display if we could display it? Right? I mean, what do people think would be useful? Would it be useful to see, for example, would it be useful to see a dynamic thing in which there's a, no, just a second, excuse me. Sorry, I'm gonna have to go soon. But here's the thing, because when we originally designed this mechanism, we didn't have any kind of dynamic output. And the, another possibility would be to have a dynamic thing where you can see messages flashing by. Or is that crazy?
Oh, I would see that.
For most people, that would be quite distracting as a non-default behavior.
No, but I mean just a single line of your, a ticker tape, so to speak. Let's imagine there was a single line ticker tape of messages.
I would personally pick at your house.
Okay, fine.
Right, and it's like, oh, you saw the interesting message, and then before you could finish reading it, it disappeared.
That kind of stuff makes my eyes go bonkers anyway.
All right, well, what is it? What is, okay. By the way, on the live stream, somebody's asking, why is there no difference between warnings and errors? Define warning, define error.
Determine whether Emacs or VI is superior. It's the same. I've reduced it to the same problem.
To a different religious war.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, but there are, I mean, do we believe that there are cases in which we have what amount to, you know, fatal errors? I mean, we've talked about this endlessly. We've talked about this. It seems to be essentially impossible to solve because one person's error is another person's warning and another, you know, etc. But okay, so the question is, what, I mean, can somebody summarize this thread?
Jeremy, you're the most active participant in this thread, so I volunteer you.
Yeah, so on the live stream, it's commenting, warning is something that displays an error, but the computation returns something. The problem is all of our computations return something. If it returns unevaluated, because, you know, zeta of 3 returns unevaluated, but it's not an error. But, I mean, it's a very hard thing to define. Okay, in that case, sorry. Can we summarize the thread for
Yeah, so what happened here was this person had this problem with a whole bunch of insert statements that were happening as part of a loop or just as part of one program. And so general stop kicked in. But this person, because each message is different, it would have actually have been interesting to see each individual message and not have the general stop kick in.
Okay, so that's an interesting algorithmic issue because the question is, okay, so that's interesting because one could imagine general stop only kicking in, you know, for example, having a different heuristic if the text is different. See what I'm saying? So let's imagine that this was log called with 3, 4, 5 arguments. Get what I'm saying?
Right. The problem is all you have to do is have changed this from log called with 3 arguments to log of ABI was called with 3 arguments. And of course, now I is the 1, 2, 3, 4. And now it's actually looking like 10 different messages when it's really the same.
Well, is that the case? That I mean, how often do we repeat the content in the message?
It depends on the message.
Mm-hmm.
Right, but were we to not repeat the content, except, I mean, okay, so a claim would be if we repeat the content, then the content is worth seeing.
And my position is the content is always worth seeing, because if I'm doing a whole bunch of sums of a whole bunch of products of a whole bunch of logs, telling me that one of the logs in my giant expression was wrong, I find really unhelpful. I want to know which of my logs was called with the wrong arguments. And so I actually want to see the full log expression and not just the head.
Well, so an interesting question, but doesn't that show up in the
stack trace?
I suppose it does.
Well, so what you're arguing for, which is an interesting possibility, is that in addition to the stack trace in the ... we should have a thing that says, show the expression that generated this, which we certainly have, right? I mean, which is the top of the stack trace at some level.
At some level, right?
Well, no, actually, it's not the top of the stack trace. It's the second thing down in the stack trace.
Or more, yeah, depending on exactly how this was implemented and what, yeah.
Yeah, it's usually that.
Right, but only because the internals of log have been excised from the stack trace.
No. The thing right before the message is generated will be the thing that generates the message.
Put I in a private context.
Very ungrammatical.
Well, you need both of them in. It might literally need a private in it.
Oh, it's going to do some kind of crazy thing. Yeah, okay, fine. All right, it's got a heuristic. All right, listen, I think I have to go, unfortunately. This is a good topic. I think what we need to do, I mean, there's a general question of kind of how to think about what else would we like to get out of messages. So one thing is the expression that generated the error. That seems like a very worthwhile thing to have and rather easy to add to the ... Another is the possibility of stopping only upon really boring, a lot of, too similar messages, so to speak. And then the other thing would be essentially message analytics of showing, how many messages came out. Like, for example, at the end, after further output will be suppressed, we could have a thing saying general, so to speak, log RCT generated 311 times, because we know that, don't we? At the end there, before the thing returns, we could say generated 311 times. Right?
I was muted, and but what I was going to say is that I got lost a little in that sentence. So
okay, so what I'm saying is, in this case, we actually know at the end that log argt was generated 10 times, right? We could say that somewhere. Further output was suppressed, and then we could say log, general, log argt, or, some other type of message cell there saying log argt was generated 10 times or something. Right, and that would be useful because you could see, for example, it would occasionally be useful to see, okay, there's 311 of those and 315 of those.
Right, and yes, and I guess what would be personally interesting to me is, was it 5 times or was it 500 times? Because if it's 5 times, I might want to turn off general stop and see all 5 messages. But if it's 500, I for the most part, I'm really not going to be interested.
By the way, do we have a way to turn off general stop?
Yes, it's off of general stop.
No, I understand that, but in here, we should have a way to do it here.
Turn off this message?
Yeah, I know, but we should have a special case for the general stop message because it's very obscure to say turn off this message to have the other messages come out. Listen.
I mean, we probably should have that generally.
What? To say, oh, I see. For each message, say don't general stop this message.
Well, no, I meant, turn off log argt.
Well, we do have that.
Okay, do we? Okay.
Yes, we have that. But what we don't have is turn off the turning off of that message.
Right. I mean, so the other thing that occurred to me is that occasionally, what would be useful for me is, the general stop is fine, but I'd be fine with it kicking in after the first message.
Yes, but that's luxury.
Yes.
Right. And the other thing we don't really have is only turn off general stop for this message.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. Okay, listen. For the next time we discuss this, let's get some buggy code to look at.
Okay.
Woohoo.
So that we actually have some decent examples of complicated message, cascades and so on. Okay. And then let's I think we can do, I think this whole ... mechanism that we invented a couple of years ago has been really nice. I think we should, generalize from that and come up with some other things. And I'm sorry we haven't been able to do the register catch thing because I know that's important. Yeah.
Although we should, definitely try to get the boilerplate code that Jeremy asked for on that.
I don't know what that is. Okay, I have got to run. Thank you all. Thanks to folks on the live stream. See you all soon.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.